Well, an up and down sort of innings. It started with an absolute downer for Lucknow, a diamond duck for Lokesh Rahul. Then Quinton de Kock and Deepak Hooda stepped on the gas. And suddenly another comeback from Kolkata in the hands of Andre Russell, picked up a couple of wickets, put the brakes on, then came back to Lucknow with a 30-run over of Shivam Mavi. They held back Stoinis and Jason Holder. We'll talk about that. And towards the end, they were well on course for 150, but that one over that Shaun Pollock had a word with somebody in the Lucknow team, and it went to his perfect score of 176, chasing 177. So overall, a very circuitous route, but they got to that total in the end. Let me come to the winner of our prediction first, Shaun. Well done on the prediction, but the show took a strange route to get there.
It leaves you a little befuddled, doesn't it? When you're sitting here watching from the sideline, they got off to such a good start. And Krunal Pandya and Bhimani just really couldn't get going. We sang Bhimani's praises earlier on in the tournament. He had one fantastic innings, but they lost their way. I mean, to get 60 in 10 overs in the middle period after getting off to a flyer, I don't know, that's a hard pill to swallow. And you do wonder what the thought process is for Lucknow. You think of Mumbai and what they did with Hardik Pandya and Pollard. You would think that someone like a Jason Holder and a Marcus Stoinis could do exactly the same role. Once you've got off to a good start, get them in. They are the guys who can hit boundaries. They're good enough batters just to knock it around as well. And I just thought the surface had changed. The commentators were rattling on about, maybe it's harder, maybe the ball's sticking. And the way those other two played, you couldn't argue with that fact because it just seemed like they couldn't find any kind of timing. Not the best over, the 19th. We can't go away from that. I think the game plan probably wasn't ideal what he tried to do there, Mavi. But that's beautiful striking, and that really has given them a chance.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things over there. One is what Mavi was doing. The other was, did Shreyas Iyer had the option to say, go Saudi for 19 and Russell for 20 the way he was bowling, Lisa?
Yeah, you could have, given the experience that Southey has, and also Russell. I mean, he bowled well. He bowled into the pitch. We spoke about that heavy ball that he tends to bowl. And he's used to bowling almost the 19th or the 20th over. So they could have potentially gone that way. But also they've invested in Shivan Mavi for a long period of time. So at some point you've got to throw these younger guys in the cauldron, put them under this type of pressure and see if they cope. Because if they want to keep investing in him, they've got to know all the areas that he needs to improve and whether he's one that you do actually keep moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, just taking off from there, Kolkata, Shaun, appeared to be a little handicapped when we looked at the bowling. We mentioned it on Cricbuzz Combox that most of the teams you've seen in the tournament, when you've had a Mukesh Chaudhary, when you've had a Yash Dayal, when you've had a Mohsin Khan, who Lucknow have, they've been the one inexperienced bowler surrounded by a lot of other experienced bowlers. Today, Kolkata had Mavi, Anukul Roy, Harshit Rana, all three together.
Yeah, they didn't. And at the start of the tournament, if you're saying those guys are going to be bowling 5 of the 20 overs, you wouldn't have sort of gone down that road. I mean, you would have been thinking Nareen Chatnavati, Saudi,
Cummins.
And Dre Russ maybe to contribute 1 or 2 from time to time. So it has been a step away from what is probably the ideal formula. I mean, Saudi's done nicely there. Nareen's done nicely. Mavi, to his credit, it was 3 overs, 1 for 20. So I don't actually have a problem with him going to him. The way Russell was going, you could have actually said, okay, maybe it's his day. He seems to have found the right length on the surface. Maybe we stick with him. But I just think the game plan, I couldn't quite work out what the game plan was. And we see it too often these days now, particularly at this stage of the tournament where all the middle strips have been used and we're starting to get onto the edge ones. The guys aren't coming up with a good game plan with the short boundaries. It really is becoming a bit of a complex scenario for captains and for bowlers involved because it just doesn't look like they've worked it out. And it looks a bit hit and miss, some of the strategies. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how short the short boundaries are. If you can get it full enough to make them hit you straight down the ground, it's the same boundary as it would be on a normal day.
The first thing that mystified me, honestly, Lisa, we spoke about it. The partnership was going well. I asked you who's next for you. I mean, you looked at me as if I was asked you a really silly question, which it was. I mean, it's obviously Marcus Stoinis next. And 2 seconds later, out walks Badoni. And then you're thinking Stoinis, then comes Stoinis and you saw what he was capable of, but he should have come in earlier, as probably should Jason Holder.
Yeah, look, I think they've really got to go, okay, Krunal Pandya, I understand like they want that left hand option. But come on, we're at a level now that if you're a good enough right-handed batter and you can put the ball out of the boundary, does it really matter? And they're holding back, but maybe based due to matchups. And I just think sometimes players are better than matchups, and that they should actually go and put Stoinis ahead. I mean, you look at that, he faced 14 deliveries. Imagine if you face another 10. I mean, who knows what the total would have been. One thing for sure is Polly wouldn't have won, and we would have been happier with that. But, he so the fact that they've kept him back, and we mentioned that in the pre-show, they've thrown him around all different places. I do feel for him. He's been able to execute maybe half of them, maybe just under half. But boy, I'd love to see him if they let him bat higher up the order and give him, almost 10 overs to play with.
And I know Stoinis is a big talking point, Shaun, but I just have this bugbear myself, maybe a bit of a bias because of the amount of time I spent in the Caribbean every year. But I just think Jason Holder's worth so much more. He's being underutilized.
Yeah, you probably get the feeling that he's not one of those pushy customers behind the scenes. Every once in a while you get a player and says, come on, coach, back me a bit here, give me a bit more of an opportunity. Maybe Jason Holder doesn't do that. Maybe he's too nice a guy. He just sits there and says, okay, well, wherever you want me to bat. Because he's got some wonderful striking ability. I mean, yeah, maybe he's not as powerful as some of the West Indian guys, but he's not far off. And given the chance to flex his muscles and show his skills, I reckon over a season, you bat him at 5 or 6, you're gonna probably reap good rewards rather than anything disappointing. So yeah, I am a bit surprised. And particularly, I don't have a problem if you lose 2 or 3 wickets up front and you put the other guys in because they can knock the spinners around. But when you've got off to a fast start and after, it's almost as good a power play as they've had, it just seems like a backward step to put guys in who are just going to knock it around for singles.
But let's talk about the man who got them there, who got them that far, even before that little push at the end, even before the 30-run over. It's not easy, Lisa, to recover from, your captain, a guy who's got you 100 not too long ago, to be out without facing a ball. But it just didn't seem to faze Quinton de Kock, or of course Deepak Hooda, but de Kock in particular.
Yeah, and that's what you need, someone of his ilk, his experience, international skipper, goes, okay, right, we've lost our captain. It's time for me to take over and really put pressure back onto the bowlers. And let's not stumble. Let's not be a team that's been based around one player scoring the bulk of the runs. Let us all kind of contribute, something like Gujarat has been able to do. So 50 off 29, strike rate of 172. He would have been bitterly disappointed that he didn't go on. Like when you get a start like that, you want to cash in and convert it to an 80 and 90, even potentially 100. But him and Deepak Hooda just got them back on track because no doubt Kolkata would have been so happy to see KL Rahul out without even facing a delivery.
It's a mix, Shaun. Deepak Hooda is the kind of guy you could expect a 40 of 19, a 50 of 29. But QDK, you know him well. He is capable of much, much more. And he would have walked back there thinking, that's 3 figures.
Yeah, he should be disappointed. And I mean, if I had to say, over all the years of watching Quinton de Kock, there have been too many opportunities where he's got himself into such a strong position. And some guys, I don't know if it's hunger or some guys who maybe cricket awareness think to themselves, well, I'm not going to throw it away. I'm going to really bat deep. Someone like a KL Rahul, when he gets into a situation, it's not like he often gives it away. But I've seen too many times with Quinton. I mean, he played brilliantly up until that 50 mark. And, was Nareen the kind of guy to try and take on? It was a bit of an iffy shot. So as much as he'd be happy with the 50, I think he'd be really happy that Stoinis had a good, and Holder played well at the back end, because by him getting out, it meant that they weren't going to get the kind of competitive score that they now have.
Yeah, well, it could have been. I mean, it's one of those could have, would have. KKR were thinking at one point when they were restricting Badoni and Krunal Pandya, and before that massive over, that it could maybe be in the 155 type range. Now they're having to chase a few more. Now, in the light of that total, what does that do, Lisa, for the run chase? Because again, Shreyas Iyer probably the key to that in the middle. You don't want to even start talking about the Russells at the back end.
No. You need to try and make a huge dent in the chasing down this total with your top order and your opening batters. That's what they need. They need a Finch to really fire. He's hanging on by a thread, you'd almost think, within that Kolkata side. So that needs to happen for them. And if they can do that, that'll just settle the dugout. It'll mean, okay, we're keeping up with the required rate. And we've still got some hitters to go. So that's all they need just to settle the nerves of the dugout.
Yeah, in the previous match, they took us by surprise because we were sort of, when we saw the makeup of the side, Venkatesh Iyer was dropped, we were going, okay, this means Narayan's the only one, possibly, who can keep Finch company at the top. Then we see Baba Indrajit, helmet in hand, pads on, and I was wondering what's going on. And we said, okay, I guess he's opening the batting, and he's doing so again today, Shaun.
Yeah, a bit of a surprise. I mean, I didn't see that game. I just saw the scorecard. But I think the big issue really for KKR is, in a team environment, you sometimes sit in the dugout and think, okay, well, if he doesn't get, we've seen this guy step up and we've seen that guy step up, and that's how we get our total. I don't think they have a Siri to give them a path or plan or any kind of roadmap to where they can go. They've tried Nareen, they've tried Finch, Iyer has tried. Everyone's had a sort of go, but you don't know where the runs are kind of coming from. It'll be a real bonus if they get off to a good start because it hasn't become the norm for them. And then Shreyas Iyer is probably the one consistent where he's made contributions, but not big enough for what we saw him coming in pre the RPL. I mean, the form he came in, you thought he was going to have an absolutely wonderful RPL. So they are caught in all pockets in many ways, looking for someone just to get them started and set the match up for maybe someone like a Russell to finish. But where's it going to come from? Well, we're going to have to just wait and see. And as Lisa said, Finch will be desperate for something.
You also mentioned, Lisa, during Cricbuzz Combox that they've tried all these opening combinations. Yeah. And the fact is, even with all these combinations, you'd expect one to have contributed something. It's not happened. Opening game against Chennai was the only time they got past 20 with any of the opening combinations. And even that came at 6.5 runs and over.
Yeah, it's been slow going and nothing is stuck. And you get a sense that Baz McCullum, being the opening batter himself, would be so frustrated looking at those numbers and going, how is it? Give me the bat. I'll go out and bat. I wonder if he's gotten to the point where he's like, we've tried so many different players. It just, and maybe there's a chance potentially down the road for Rahane to come back in as well. Maybe they need someone that is probably a little bit more stable, isn't as explosive, but gets you off to a better start and gives you that partnership to kind of dent the opposition's confidence.
The only problem is that road is not very long, because if you start looking down the road, suddenly there's this roadblock that comes up. It comes with a big letter E on it, and it says eliminated. So you've got to keep going down the road before you find that silly little roadblock. But what they'll also be faced with, Shaun, is a very decent looking bowling lineup. I mean, the one inexperienced member has already established himself. He's probably the best bowler on show as far as the last game was concerned in Mohsin Khan. So that's a decent attack. Yeah,
he's really stepped up. Chamir has been fantastic. Bishnow's starting to find his feet. Holder, we know what he can bring. Avash Khan, if he gets going. And then you got Bishnoi, who's starting to grow in confidence. So I like that bowling lineup. I mean, I've liked it the whole way through the tournament. Krunal Pandya has played a big part as well. And you can even get an over from Marcus Stoinis. So it's not like there's not enough options there. They really have got all the bases covered. And from a captaincy perspective, boy, you love that. There's nothing worse than having to rely on just five. You've got the other options and the different approaches, the different variations. So it's nicely balanced.
And it's not something every team can boast of at this stage in the tournament. They're just looking settled. They can just walk in there not thinking of, okay, who's in the squad? Who are we going to get in, barring injury, of course.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, like Polly said, they've got all bases covered. Then from a matchup perspective, then everything's sorted, isn't it? The game kind of flows naturally. You go, right, okay, Stoinis, you're coming on. Krunal, you're coming on, and everyone knows their role and what they're there for. So, it is probably the most balanced bowling lineup, and that's why they're sitting high up on the points table.
Yeah, and it's Mohsin Khan's given them a good start with a couple of heavy balls up top. It's again that relatively makeshift opening combination of Baba Indrajit and the other end we've got Aaron Finch, who needs a few runs. Quick look at the points table, and this is where it stands. This is why it's so crucial for Kolkata. This is why it's also so crucial that Punjab didn't pick up what they should have. So Punjab are stuck on 10. If Kolkata were to somehow get a successful run chase here, they get to 10 points, and that makes a little bit of a crowd there. If they don't, they're already starting to look down that road of that big E. Lucknow will just get to 16, and they'll be putting a distance between themselves and everyone else with a very healthy net run rate, even better than that of Gujarat. So they'll be given a very nice cue from Shaun Pollock when this match would have finished. But quickly looking back at Punjab, just to wrap up on their travails today, how much will the loss of 2 points have dented them today, Shaun? Because it's been WL. They just haven't found consistency.
Yeah, and it hasn't just been this campaign. It's been a lot of their campaigns where they haven't found the consistency they're after. And I think the method of they weren't able to really put them under pressure. It seemed like Rajasthan were just basically cruising the whole way through it. And I think that's more the disappointing part, because even though it's a 20-over game, you do have to have the ability to apply pressure and make us think out the box and really, especially with you. I mean, you think of someone like, you think of the top three. I mean, you've got Butler, he goes relatively cheaply. And then you've got Jaswal, who's back into the mix. He hasn't played for a while. He's got a point to prove. And Padikkal hasn't got any form to speak of. So those are the top three. There's the opportunity to apply once Butler gets out. And they weren't able to do so. So I think therein lies the disappointment, more the manner of the defeat, and obviously the points that have gone amiss.
They put a few things right, Lisa. The number one thing that I think they put right is they weren't playing musical chairs. They were trying to keep a stable lineup. And yet, even though they seem to have identified an 11, with maybe Shah Rukh Khan being the one who's not quite contributed, it's still not working for them in terms of getting some W's on the board.
No, and they would have been happy with potentially the total that they put on the board. But from a bowling perspective and the amount of left-handers that Rajasthan had meant Chahar just was not as effective as they would have liked. And that's where they're probably, from a spin department, they don't have the depth that we're seeing Lucknow have, as in you've got one to cover all bases. Ashdeep Singh bowls well at the death, but he seems to be almost the only one. Kahiso Rabada, you need him to fire up at the start and kind of take the top order out for him to be effective. So, they're just missing that little X factor from a bowling perspective.
Where do they go from here, Shaun? Do they need to start doing anything with their 11, or was it just an off day?
I don't know if it's an off day. We've seen too many of it to just have been an off day. Do you want to tinker with your 11? In many ways, you've got to trust this 11 to try and get you qualified. They've got to start holding fingers and crossing fingers for other teams like Mumbai and Chennai to play out of their socks, even though they're basically out of the tournament. I'm trying to think how you can try and install consistency, because at the end of the day, it is about the consistency. People think, well, it's a T20 match, it's 20 overs, you come in, you play your shots, everything happens quickly. You have to find a way to become more consistent. And, after 10, 11 games, you would think they've got some kind of idea of what the blueprint is to create that consistency. And it just doesn't seem to be there.
And it's not going to get very easy for them. They don't play the bottom two. They play Bangalore, Delhi, and Hyderabad. All three teams, Lisa, above them coming up. So that's not making it any easier.
No. And when you saw the net run rate as well, it's in the negative. So things are really hard for them. And what they need to do now is just talk about just winning your remaining games. And then you never know what might happen. Scenarios.com may come into it, and top teams may not progress and other teams falter, so you may be able to sneak yourself in. So they've just got to focus on getting 2 points first and foremost.
Yeah, most important, as we said at the start of this weekend, every little shift upwards or downwards could actually be taking you in a direction you don't want to go. But plenty more to talk about, whether it's scenarios.com or just how teams are faring. This is only halfway through the weekend. We're only halfway through the second game of Saturday. We're going to talk much more of that. An early wicket has been lost by Kolkata, that of the makeshift opener, Baba Indrajit. Played out 5 dot balls, then got out in the 6th ball of the first over. Not looking good in the run chase. We will evaluate it on Cricbuzz Combox when we come back in the 10th over. That's all on Cricbuzz Live.